to the new CEO of Bayfield Electric Co-op, and Steve Sandstrom, who is on the Bayfield County Board and on several committees, which you can tell us about. So we'll have the presentations and then have discussion, question and answer, and see where this takes us. Okay, so we didn't draw straws. But pardon? Oh, okay. They just put something technological in front of me and this is blowing me out of the water. So I have no idea what that is.
Don't touch it.
Don't touch it. It's my plan. Thank you. Don't touch it. Okay, well, why don't we start with Steve? We'll start this way. Okay. All right.
My name is Steve Sandstrom. I presently serve as District 1 Supervisor for Bayfield County Board. And I'm involved in a number of committees. One that directs or relates directly to this conversation is I'm the chair of the Bayfield County Comprehensive Plan Revision Committee, which is dealing, well, one of the things I'm pushing is that the new comprehensive plan very specifically has climate change as a important consideration in how we are working in the county and how we're developing community. I've been personally involved in a lot of this type of stuff in my whole adult life. I have a master's in sustainable community development and have worked really hard with a lot of organizations in this community to look at sustainability and so forth. So this is something I'm really concerned about. And it was one of the reasons that I made the decision to run for county board was I really felt there was a way that I could make a difference in our community and bring a lot of these different issues forward. And so it's been pretty exciting. I think I have some notes on my phone here, so if I'm looking down at my phone, it's not because I'm looking at messages, it's my notes. But I think it's important to know that Bayfield County has actually quite a long history of looking at energy conservation and really looking at sustainable community development. And one of our feathers in our cap, we have for our facilities, all the county-owned facilities, we're at carbon neutral. With the combination of solar panels and energy conservation and so forth, we actually have saved as much carbon as we're using, which I don't think there's any other county in Wisconsin that can say. Now, put that in perspective, that's only 10% of our carbon use is in the facilities. Our biggest issue obviously is transportation. And we have highway committee and forestry and lots of vehicles. And so we've been really working to try to help that part of it. We've been doing a pretty good job on becoming much better with how we operate our facilities. But I think it's important to know that we have been for quite a while using compressed natural gas to run quite a few vehicles for the county, both in our sheriff's department, forestry, and so forth. Have been using these for a while. But we're now looking at, we just are in the process of adding a new compressor system that takes natural gas and compresses it so that it can be used for vehicles. We're looking at getting that in place so that we can expand that to hopefully even start to have some of our larger trucks in the highway department being able to use that compressed gas at all. Now, it's important to understand that that doesn't do anything for carbon emissions, but it's a whole lot cleaner than diesel or gasoline from the standpoint of other pollutants. So if anything, at most, it's an interim. Electric vehicles is something that we're looking at right now. we have on order actually a couple of trucks now for the highway department that are, completely electric. The due dates on these are out like a year because there's such a demand for these vehicles now. And all the incentives that are part of this Inflation Reduction Act aren't helping that, because it's making them far more affordable for the public. It's $7,500, I think, for buying vehicles. I mean, that's a quite an incentive to start moving to electric vehicles. So that's one of the things that we're working on. We are looking at piloting a couple of other vehicles as for patrol cars that are electric, and to see how well that works considering the size of our county, and how the range of electric vehicles is still, I mean, it's about 300 miles is about the best you can expect out of a standard size automobile. But we're really taking a hard look at that so we can try to get that down. We have quite a bit of solar. We're looking at adding more solar to our panels that we have already. Let's see here. Some of the things that we're looking at to the future are other technologies, including geothermal. We're starting to investigate how we could use geothermal to heat and cool our buildings. Right now, other things that are starting to get onto the radar include hydrogen fuel cells as a possible alternative for vehicles. We're possibly looking at some places where we might use wind, but we don't have the best situation for wind in our county. And something else that Mark Allison said I should include is no one's doing this around here yet. It's mostly a coastal thing, but using wave power to generate electricity. Lake Superior has some potential for that. And so that's something else that's sort of on the radar right now. A couple other things here. Probably one of the most exciting things that's happening right now is that we got a WIDA grant for looking at putting together a housing development in the city of Watford that will be 40 to 60 units for affordable housing, but also would include senior living, possibly assisted living. It would be located right next to the Northern Lights on a 10-acre parcel there that the county owns. And we just put that project out for bid, and we are actually very pleased. We've got 5 different developers that are putting in bids for this development. One of the things that we're going to work on is to make sure that part of that process is that they're all energy conservation designs, and that do use renewable energy and so forth. Just again, being a model to the community for what everyone should be doing. Let's see. A couple other things that are happening right now. We are adding some more solar panels onto Northern Lights. And let's see. We're in the process of rebuilding the hot water system that's in the basement of the annex that works with the solar panels that are on the annex. So that is up to date. And let's see here. This is something that I had written down here. Oh, the other thing was that with the idea of using more electric vehicles, the highway department now is looking at putting in a sort of a microgrid project with large batteries and 4 charging stations for the highway vehicles. One would be right at the or 2 would be by the sheriff's office, 1 at the highway garage, and then also at the other remote highway garages in the county, so that there would be options for recharging vehicles around the county. And that's happening this coming year, that would be put together. And let's see, I think that's everything that I had written down here for tonight. The other thing, just to reiterate, that's really important to me, and that is that as we're putting together our comprehensive plan, that we are really looking at creating a plan that is a good example of system thinking and helping people understand that we have all the different, parts of the comprehensive plan, from housing to natural resources to, all the different things, but people have to understand that everything affects everything else. And we can't be making decisions in our own little silo. So we can't have economic development off in a corner, figuring what's best for economic development, and then housing people over here, and nobody talks to each other. We have to come up with a way of putting a plan together where we keep asking the question, okay, how does this affect this group? What's the consequence of making this decision? Outside of just, the one thing that particular committee is working on. So I think that's really, really important, and is something that is absolutely essential for us to really move forward effectively with climate change or just sustainability in general. So, do you have questions, or is that at the end, or?
At the end.
Okay, all right. Take it away.
Thank you. Welcome, and thanks for having me, by the way. My name is Chris Copel. I'm the CEO of Bayfield Electric. I've been at Bayfield just a little over a year now. One of the challenges we have with all of this funding is, how do we go about getting it? We're a small organization. We've got very talented staff, but we don't have grant writers on staff. I've done a lot of things in my career, pretty much anything you can do in the electric industry. I spent my whole career in it. I'm not a grant writer. So one of the things that we're looking at Bayfield Electric is how do we go out and get as much of the funding that's available, both stuff that's available directly to electric co-ops. And I think it's, and Billy, you're going to touch on this a little bit more. I think it's $1 billion in the infrastructure plan and 9.7 billion in the Inflation Reduction Act. It's earmarked directly for electric co-ops. Well, it's a lot of money. There's also a lot of co-ops. How do you go about getting access to it? How do we go about making sure that you're being involved in the process? Those are some of the challenges that we are going to face. And I say going to because as of right now, we're obviously following what's going on, but we're not versed in all the nitty gritty nuts and bolts details, nor do I think we're probably ever going to be in a position to do that. We don't have the staff to do that. So how do you go about getting access to those funds? There's several ways that potentially could be done. I was actually just in Minneapolis last Thursday and Friday for what's called our national association, the National Rural Electric Cooperative Association, or NRECA, is actually looking very hard at this as to how do we make sure that co-ops get access to this. They're providing some help. They're actually doing a lot of the I'll call it the grunt work, for lack of a better term, on researching what's out there, what's available. A lot of it, as I understand it, from the people I talked to last week, is still basically in development, I think is fair to say. So a lot of it we don't know for sure yet. My view is that we want to get access to as much funding as we can, period. If it's out there, we want access to it, and everything's within reason, of course. But is there ways we can get funding for improving some of our system that is, 60, 70 years old? We've got some part of the western part of our system, some of the original stuff that is literally original. It's built in the late 40s and early 50s, and the way our linemen talk about it is that, what they say is there's more splices than wire at this point. Can we get some funding to underground that under the resiliency component? Are there opportunities for renewables? We're going to look at that. One of the challenges we have from a renewable perspective, though, is that we do have long-term all requirements contract with our power supplier, the Bayfield Power Co-op. And so we have certain restrictions and covenants under that we also have to be cognizant of as we go through this process. So we're really just trying to figure out kind of what's available, what can we do. We're looking for partners as part of this. I know I've been talking to Dan Wiggins of Bad River Tribe about trying to get some funds that they may have access to for some projects we're looking at over there. I am completely agnostic from a Bayfield Electric perspective as to how we get the funds, who helps us with it. We're looking for all the help we can get. If there's somebody out there, whether it's the county, the tribes that we serve, Check Bay, anybody that's out there that can help us as part of this process, I'm all ears, because again, we're not we're small. We don't have expertise in this. And the problem that I believe is going to happen is that even if you wanted to hire it, everybody else and their brother is looking for that too. So even if even if our board decided we want to set aside however much money we felt we needed to go out and hire grant writers, are you gonna be able to get it? Are you gonna be able to find it? So where we're at is we're still trying to figure out what's the best way to go about that. I'll give you another example. One of the things that NRECA is doing is that they're forming consortiums, they're calling them, where co-ops can go in together and submit for funding through the consortiums. So one of the things that's not clear, and one of the questions we haven't answered yet is, so say Bayfield Electric goes in as part of this consortium and goes in and gets funding, and we get 3% or whatever our percentage of that would be, some small percentage of that. Does that mean then that we're precluded from other sources of funding for the same type of projects, right? We'd be better off pursuing stuff individually. And again, I don't know the answer to any of that, but those are the types of things that we're discussing at a staff level is how do we go about doing this? And unfortunately, I don't have the answers as we sit here today. We're really watching it. We're really trying to figure out what we can do to help improve our system and then therefore, to improve the reliability for our reliability, resiliency, all of those other things that go into that for our membership. And so we're still in process, and again, I'm part of the reason I was excited about, being part of this is I'm open to any help we can get as part of this process, because if there's money out there, I just soon have access to it and try to get as much as we can. But how we do that, how we go about that, who do we work with? Is it better to submit it under our name, or under the tribe's name, for example? All those type of things have to go into those discussions that I think we're just on the very front end of those. There's gonna be a lot of work and a lot of discussions that I see coming as part of this process. So yeah.
All right.
Hopefully it's step on too much of your part down, Paul.
I also thank you for having me here. And I have a bit of a prepared thing, a little slideshow and text, but before I get started in that, I'd just like to reflect just a little bit about what Chris just said. I've helped Bayfield County write pretty much every energy grant that they've got. I've helped Red River write most of theirs also. I'll be glad to help.
I know.
Bayfield.
We've had that discussion. I know.
So there you go. There's
And
And the good thing about the work that we do at Check Bay Renewables is it's all free and volunteer. I mean, I'm not going to charge anything for anything. And also just driving down Highway 2, I already got a project in mind. So I think it's really great to have specific projects to go after the funding. So anyway, we'll talk about that.
Yeah,
later.
yeah.
Now, onto this. Next slide, Roger. I'm ready to go to the number 2 here. The Inflation Reduction Act. Roger will get there in a little bit, I'm sure. The Inflation Reduction Act is a huge bill. And it's obvious I'm not going to cover it all in 8 to 10 minutes or 8 to 10 hours. So I'm obviously going to focus just on one part, and that's the bottom line there, the clean energy part. But the healthcare component of this, reducing healthcare costs and raising the money to pay for all this through tax reform and having surplus for deficit reduction is all very important too. And I'm sure that'll be part of another broader conversation another day. One of the biggest things, Roger, next slide. One of the biggest incentives in the Inflation Reduction Act is extending and increasing the federal tax credit. It's also known as the investment tax credit or ITC, and it's going to increase to 30% over the next decade. This will apply to all solar PV projects and all other clean energy projects installed in our homes, our area homes and businesses. And it will also allow the clean energy installers in our area to have the certainty that that 30% incentive is in place. So their investments in equipment and manpower are assured. Roger, we having trouble advancing slides?
Yeah, I'll get there in a minute.
All right, I'm on number 4 now. All right, that's all right. But the way I set up these slides, there's very little up there, and most of the text is here. But it just kind of helps me keep the flow going. It's actually for me just as much as it is for you. Anyway, another big part, and this is huge, it's called direct pay. For years, nonprofits, tribes, and municipalities, which is primarily what I work with, municipalities, tribes, and nonprofit too.
Yeah.
They've been disadvantaged because they can't use the 30% federal tax credit. But now the playing field is leveled. Instead of the credit, they're going to get a direct payment equal to the tax credit or 30% of an eligible project cost. Direct pay will start in 2023, and if certain requirements are met, it could increase to 40, 50, or even 60%. A good example is the housing project in Bayfield County. If it qualifies for low income, it will be a 50% payment of all of the clean energy projects. How exactly that works is we discussed many times, it's still being developed, but we're hopeful that it'll be 50%. EV charging infrastructure is another item that's new that'll be eligible for the 30% tax credit starting in 2023. A good example of local impact about this is the Ashland Ford dealership down the road reached out to us to explore the possibility of putting in an EV fast charger. But under the new law, they can use the 30% tax credit and they can depreciate it. So about 50% of the project cost would be covered. In addition, the bipartisan infrastructure law that was passed last November will pay up to 80% of an EV fast charger. That pot of money is being administered to the Wisconsin Department of Transportation and is part of the Wisconsin Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Plan, which just was approved by the federal government on September 14th. That pot of money again comes with specific preferred routes and requirements. It will be competitive, so you can't just put in an EV charger anywhere and get it paid 80%. Highway 2 is one of the designated routes. The application will start in 2023. And what I found particularly interesting about the Wisconsin plan is that they specifically mentioned Highway 2 and Maple Road, which is the casino. The casino is already designated as an important site to put in an EV fast charger. So you can get 80% of it. paid for.
Yeah, well, we're
I'm
gonna
sure-
have to find that match.
We'll work on that. Roger, I'm on, next slide 6, the USDA. Yeah, the USDA Rural Energy for America program, also called REAP, is going to increase our funding from 25 to 50% of the project's cost. This is another big win for local area businesses. Besides getting 50% of the project paid for, they can also use the 30% tax credit, and they also can depreciate the expense. So 80 to 90% of a clean energy project will be covered, will be paid for. Wow. No business with exposure to the sun should miss out on this opportunity, in my opinion. This is huge for local business and clean energy. It only applies to business. So it's just business. Battery storage is another concept. Prior to the Inflation Reduction Act, battery storage was eligible for the tax credit with many restrictions and not as a standalone project. That has changed with the IRA. Standalone projects are now eligible and most of the restrictions have been removed. Battery storage is an important part of making energy generated from solar PV available when the sun isn't shining. And it can assist in the grid by reducing peak demand. Some utilities like Excel already have programs in place that reward customers for peak shaving. Bayfield County's new jail and courthouse microgrid is a good example that's taken advantage of that incentive. And as I was reading this, I realized that Bayfield Electric also has incentives, control thing, water control and stuff. So I didn't mean to just specifically pick out Excel.
No, that's fine.
But the project, the project that we're working on in Bayfield County, Excel is paying them $5,000 a year to be on the program. It's direct money that's a good benefit and it couldn't be done without the battery storage and microgrid project. Next slide. Soon, the 30% tax credit will also apply to a multitude of clean energy equipment and households. Things like heat pumps, heat pump hot water heaters, biomass stoves and boilers, and electrical upgrades needed to install clean energy projects will be eligible. In addition to the tax credit, the Wisconsin Office of Energy Innovation will develop programs with rebates for home energy efficiency and electrification projects. This, coupled with the tax credit mentioned in the last slide, will pay for a large portion of household clean energy projects. The programs will be income-based with rebate percentages and caps. The details, again, are still being worked out and will be announced for 2023. Geothermal, also known as ground source heat pumps, is also included in the 30% tax credit and the direct pay program. This will allow all homes, businesses, municipalities, nonprofits, and tribes to get at least 30% of a geothermal project paid for. Replacing natural gas for heating will be the next big challenge in reaching carbon reduction goals. This is a welcome start as the industry matures with improved technology. Ground source heat pumps and air source heat pumps are part of the electrification of everything that will be necessary to wean us off fossil fuels. In addition to the EV charging infrastructure, the cars themselves will have expanded and extended tax credit. Even used EVs will be eligible for the tax credit. This will help accelerate the EV transition, but does come with a few challenges for the auto industry. The $7,500 credit is actually divided into two separate credits. $3,750 credit for electric vehicles with batteries produced in North America. And the other $3,750 credit for electric vehicles using certain percentages of critical battery minerals extracted or processed in the United States. There aren't any of those right now, so they got to get kind of with the program. Elon Musk announced, I'm getting off topic here, sorry, Roger. But Elon Musk announced in Texas that he's going to start a process facility for lithium. And that's what this bill's about, to get American production and processing and mining. Now back to text. Vehicles meeting only one requirement will be eligible for only half the credit, $3,750. I encourage you to visit our website, checkbyrenewables.org, and find the initiative button labeled Inflation Reduction Act. Here you will find all the information that I've just presented and more. There are many links to summaries that are reflected of the act, as well as the actual text of the bill. Have you read the bill? I've read most of it, although not so much about the Medicare and the housing or, the tax, but the clean energy part. I sent you a couple pages of it yesterday. Check Bay Renewals will continue to update that page as more information becomes available. So visit the site often, and we can be reached with the contact form on that website or at checkbayrenewables@gmail.org. Thank you very much.
So my question for you is, did I put you to sleep when you're reading the bill?
Oh, yeah. Yes, but I do multiple times of resistance. The problem with reading the bill, I'll pass this over to you.
No, that's fine.
The problem with reading the bill is they continually refer to other bills.
Yeah.
And so you really can't read the bill.
Right.
But one of the things that's on our website is the table of contents. And that was one of the worst things about the bill. It didn't come with the table of contents. There's no organization in it at all. And so I actually took the time and made my own table of contents, and it's on our website. So that you don't, if you're interested in a particular topic, you can just go down and find it in the table of contents and go right to page 203, which is the 2 pages about rural co-ops. You don't need to read 273 pages. You need to read 2 if you're interested. And even though they refer to other bills, if you're really interested, you can look them up. Philomena, all yours.
You know, I sat through 3 years of law school, so reading really boring stuff and not falling asleep is. So my name is Philomena Quebec Bourgeois, Indonesian Manita, Babi Washington, Nakaz, Makundo, Ding, Mashkaziving, Indonjaba. So I currently serve as the Economic Development Coordinator for Bad River. You know, and when we're talking about climate change, Indigenous peoples are particularly vulnerable to climate change. And, you know, this is reflected, I was doing some research in preparing this presentation, but certainly like the 2022 Indian Health Board legislative recommendations talk about how, you know, our people are particularly vulnerable to climate change. There's, I mean, there are communities in Alaska right now where their housing is in the ocean. You know, certainly Bad River experienced 2 devastating floods in the past several years. Like there's certain plants that are very important to us, like monoman has been identified as one of the most climate vulnerable species. And, you know, monoman is central to our identity as a people. And it's really, you know, the climate impacts are very closely intertwined with our health. You know, if we don't have access, not only do we experience a nutritional deficiency and economic impacts because it's just so central, but there's also mental health impacts that come with that as well. And so, you know, certainly the tribe welcomes changes, you know, and legislative focus on climate change. To give you, you know, some perspective on what Bad River Tribe has been doing, we've been working very closely with, you know, Czech Renewable and our partners in the power companies, Excel and Bayfield Electric, that supply the power to the tribe. You know, upgrading our power systems is very important. Some of our tribe doesn't have food-based power, and we've been experiencing power outages and brownouts that have an impact on our infrastructure. So it's very it's hard on our HVAC systems when we don't have a reliable source of power. You know, and certainly it can impact our water and sewer systems and other infrastructure, our casino. I mean, they have generators, but so we've been looking at upgrades certainly are needed, and then providing renewable energy resiliency through the building of solar grids at the tribal clinic, which is pretty massive. You know, if you're out in the community, take a peek. You're welcome to drive around. Our clinic is right behind our casino, and then right behind that is a big solar field. And it's something that the tribe is really proud of. We have another fairly big solar field that's also at the water and sewer plant and one at the tribal administration building. And all 3 of these grids come with a battery storage backup. So that if we do experience outages, you know, these batteries can kick in and the solar can kick in to offset and provide that energy resilience that we need in that continuation. We have a major feasibility study going on to look at biogas. Biogas is really interesting. I don't have time to get into it, but look it up. Biogas is fascinating, and it really could be a way that we could get off pipeline fed natural gas. The tribe is also shoring up serious threats to essential localized environmental concerns, including line 5 removal from the watershed, and also neutralizing Pinocchio Hills mining threats through partnership and strategic acquisition. That's within, you know, I think that's certainly being talked about. We have specific plans for Monoman that we're putting out into the universe, and really thinking about the relationship that we have with Monoman and planning for the future. Building up our local food systems. We've put major investments into tribal food processing facility, food distribution, our food distribution program, and our food sovereignty program. Currently, we're working on the final stages of entering into a cooperative relationship with USDA to purchase local food and then distribute it to families in need through some sort of CSA system, and investing in tribal health. So we're right sizing the tribal clinic. It was 50% undersized when it was built. So we're going to double the size of the tribal clinic and add an aquatic fitness center to address health disparities. I'll note that the life expectancy report for the United States came out in just a few weeks ago, and for American Indian people, we've seen a drop to 65 years old as life expectancy, and that's pretty consistent with what we're seeing in Bad River as well. And that is lower than all countries in America, in the Americas, except for Haiti. So investments in tribal health are really needed. I mean, we have seen some really significant impacts in our community with the COVID pandemic, and not necessarily simply COVID related deaths, but overdose deaths and lots of other deaths that are associated with chronic disease. So the Inflation Reduction Act itself, my understanding is that it was an authorization and it wasn't appropriated. And so we will need Congress to do some more work in order to actually appropriate the funding that may come when the FY 2023 budget has passed, or with the continuing resolution that is being horse traded right now. There's a pending government shutdown as of September 30th. Who knows what's going to happen? So the act itself, there's specific provisions in the act to benefit tribal nations around climate resistance, adaptation, mitigation to drought impacts, specific line items for tribal fish hatcheries, home electrification, and then some additional funding for loan guarantees for tribal energy development. What we've been seeing globally on a tribal level is that when these big bills have come out recently, there have been specific allocations for tribes, but inconsistent and sometimes chaotic distributions from the agencies. So for instance, with this local food, the local food initiative that I just talked about, the USDA set aside 40% of each state's allocation for tribes, which sounds really good when oftentimes USDA has forgotten about tribes completely. But with this particular program, nearly all of the tribes in Wisconsin applied for the funding. one tribe in California, one tribe, I think, where are the Pequots?
Connecticut.
Yeah, one tribe in Connecticut. And so what we saw is the tribe in California got over $1 million. And then, and then there was less funding for the tribes in Wisconsin. But only 16 tribes in total applied throughout the country. So, it was a little bit, like I said, a little bit chaotic and inconsistent. There was funding that NOAA had for CARES Act funds that was supposed to come to assist with tribal Great Lakes fisheries, because the Great Lakes fisheries were completely cut out of the first allocation because they were only provided to coastal tribes, not tribes that were within the Great Lakes. Bad River applied for these funds to NOAA within the deadline. The program officer forgot about it or somehow didn't include Bad River. So instead of Bad River receiving those funds during the real hardship of the pandemic, we are only now receiving those funds. And so, I'm really hoping that the administration works out some of these kinks that we've seen, because it's been really chaotic and inconsistent. It's difficult when these allocations come in for competitive grants, especially when they're all at once, because we have to pick and choose how we're gonna do things. Implementation is always challenging when we don't have enough staffing, and if it's simply funding that's come for stuff, and there's no provisions for the capacity building that the tribes need in order to really tackle the climate issues that we're facing, it's not feasible for tribes to go after those funds. So, the other thing that I'm just going to flag is that in order to get this Inflation Reduction Act passed, there was a deal made with Joe Manchin to reform the NEPA, and so the National Environmental Policy Act, and streamline processes for both renewable energy projects, but also fossil fuel projects, including pipelines. And that bill, which is 92 pages long, was released, I think, last week. I have a copy if anybody's interested. I haven't gone through it with a fine-tooth comb, but it's pretty interesting. And it really, what I've been reading is that it seems to, Congress has taken, sometimes what Congress has done with these controversial bills like NEPA is try to address the regulatory issues in a legislative manner and sweep away the authority of the agencies to engage in the permitting process. And it seems like that's what's happening on a very specific pipeline bill that's related to that's located in the East Coast. We've also seen that with mining legislation, with wolf legislation. This move that legislators have to, for instance, take wolves out of the eligibility of the Endangered Species Act. And those kinds of things seem to be problematic and beyond the scope. Really, NEPA was set up for a purpose, and there's actually a judicial review of this particular project that's in process. And so if that goes through, that could be potentially really devastating for the tribes. So that's definitely an area to watch. So with that, I'll end my presentation.
Well, I don't know about the rest of you, but that's much more than I could ever have anticipated. This is an extremely complex area. And there is, as we've identified, a lot to figure out for a lot of the federal and state folks are looking at this, trying to interpret and give us some guidance. The very positive thing that I'm hearing here tonight is what has been true of this, of the culture of the South Shore, and that's collaboration, that people working together. And that's people at the table, all those out there who we've elected or are the agencies, their businesses that are going to be dealing with this, as well as us as the citizens, who definitely have become much more informed tonight, much more informed. So with that being said, as kind of a summary, I'd like to open this up to the group for questions. Yeah.
Yeah, can I just follow up on something that
Sure.
said
Okay.
in terms of, so, and I don't remember which bill this originated out of, but there was a specific funding available for EV school buses.
Mhm.
That had to have been, I think the deadline for that was, I believe it was the end of August. Bayfield Electric, because Bayfield Electric covers all or parts of 10 school districts. We don't have a single school or a single facility, bus facility in our service territory. So we were not part of that, but other co-ops in Wisconsin were part of that. And as I understand it, that whole process was just an absolutely chaotic nightmare. And the reason I'm bringing that up is my fear is that that's going to be more the norm than the exception going forward. I think some of the stuff that you were bringing up points to that, and that's why I think that there's going to be a lot of work goes into this, and there could be some disappointments as part of that process, because I think any program like this, it's massive and there's going to be problems, I think, and that's why, and I think we just all need to steel ourselves for that. I would say probability. That there may be things that you know, and you guys have experienced this certainly more than I have for certain Bayfield Electric, but you get into large government programs and there's going to be problems, and that doesn't mean we don't go for the funding. That doesn't mean we don't put the work in. That doesn't mean that we don't pursue every dollar we can possibly get. But I just think we all need to be kind of realistic about what some of those things that could come out of this, because it is going to be it's going to be a mad rush, I think, for the funds. So I'm Bill, I don't, maybe you guys have a different opinion, but that's my view of it from our perspective.
The federal government works really slow. All the projects that we're working on, the NIPA review takes a year. Bayfield County, we're still working on the 2020 grant that we got. And we just need an extension because we, you know, the supply chain, there's all kinds of things that are slowing everything up. The fortunate part about all this, and I don't disagree with anything that Chris said, the fortunate part is that we have the funds, like the 9.7 billion that's allocated for the co-ops. They're going to be there until 2031.
Right.
So yeah, the federal government's going to take their sweet time about it, and maybe climate change, we don't have that time. But the money will be there. We just need to keep pushing at it. We need to keep applying for it. We need to keep putting the projects in, and we're going to keep doing this for the next decade.
Linda.
I would like to throw out a idea that certainly struck me by listening to you guys, because it was very informative to hear about all the possible projects. But coordination and planning and setting priorities in some kind of a staged way made a lot of sense to me. And I was wondering if that's in the ballpark for some kind of countywide steering committees for mitigating climate change, or climate change and action steering committees, where for instance, all of you would be participants and you talk about what you're doing each month. And then, say, you know, well, we have a goal of 2025 to have this many charging stations around the county. And these are the people who are gonna make that happen, whether it's the county, whether it's the electric co-op, whether it's Excel, whether, and then everybody knows that's their charging station plan. So that's just one of the things that I have on the uppermost is who's coordinating all this, who's taking the coordination role and responsibility.
I think David.
I have a question for Steve.
Yeah.
I was wondering whether the Wisconsin Counties Association has been helpful, potentially helpful, useful to you in pursuing information regarding to this need.
I can start off by saying that they've been extremely helpful in a lot of areas. It's a really good organization. Specifically on this bill, I'm not aware of any big effort yet. It's so new. But they are a good organization. I had a chance to go to their convention last year, and I was very impressed with the kinds of things that they were taking a look at and bringing to the attention of all the counties. Just to go off of that question related to your statement, is the thing that drives me crazy is how little citizens understand the role of county government. It has more impact on a person's life than any other area of government. I mean, you look at it from the standpoint of the highways you have to drive on, you know, security and the sheriff's department, with health department, with, you go down the list, everybody uses those services. And yet we rarely have anybody show up for a board meeting unless it's one particular issue that, you know, is a thorn in somebody's side.
Yeah.
I mean, but no one's there to listen. And I don't understand that. Somehow we have to get people to change their mindset about personal involvement, but also what is really important. You know, we're no longer considered citizens. We're considered consumers, you know, and somehow that has to change. You know, if we want to see people starting to be concerned about climate change. And so I don't know the answer to that question, but that's one of those things that somehow that fundamentally has to change. You know, if we want to see any change in the world, is somehow we have to get people to really understand what sustainable community development means. You know, and so I'm all ears. Anybody has any ideas?
I would add better leadership, better promotion. I was here 4 years and didn't know what you did. I
Yeah,
had to ask people,
yeah,
who knew? You know?
right. Yeah.
That is detailed. Okay.
Was how important it is, and how you run human services and aging and all of
Yeah.
that goes into it. So I think leadership and self-promotion would be a
Right.
possibility. We all know what the city does.
Yeah,
The other one too is Ashland. People work, you can't go to it every other month, the meeting was held in the evening.
Bayfield County, all their meetings are after 4.
Yeah.
All the committee, I mean, the board meetings are at 6 every month. And most committee meetings meet late afternoon, some of them, there's a few that are in the morning, but that's a conscious decision to make it more available to citizens, but yeah, nobody shows up. I think I don't want to dwell on this so long, but I think one of the biggest problems is the loss of the local paper, you know, of readership. Not that the paper's there, but readership's gone. And because that was a way for people, easy way to advertise. And, social media is, in some ways is really great, in other ways it's terrible because it's so compartmentalized. It's your group, and how do you get information on the county into that particular group? There's just no easy way to get that information shared with everybody, and so that's a problem.
Philomena, I have a question. On all these possible fundings, that is there a match that we have to do on some of them? And if so, I mean, I worked in legal at the tribe for 4 years on A&A grants. First 2 years, business, commercial, legal needs, and getting business as enterprises, The second 2 years, it was child welfare, but, and those were grants out of Washington, D.C. So that's what my question is, do we have to come up with grants, grant money to a partial, or are you just flat out giving to us?
It really depends on you don't know until the notice of funding comes down, for the particular grant program. But a trend that we've been seeing is really minimal or no match for tribal projects, which it's been good because it's a significant barrier oftentimes. Yeah, so that's oh, go ahead, Chris.
The barrier associated with that is that you have to front the money, so you have to put all of those expenses up front, and sometimes the governments don't have that money. It might be $300,000 worth of equipment that you're purchasing, and now you got to wait 6 months to get reimbursed, and then they'll provide you that $600,000, but you still have other obligations to keep the project running. So it's that put the money forward in order to move your project forward. So you have to have that funding set aside in order to do that.
It becomes a cash flow issue with, when you have those reimbursable grants.
I remember the drawdowns.
Yeah.
Steve,
That just reminded me of something I completely forgot to mention. And that is Bayfield County is now part of a carbon sequestration program. And carbon sequestration, so capturing carbon, and it's the forest that's going to be capturing that carbon. And what it does is it allows, we keep track of what carbon is sequestered and isn't going into the atmosphere, and companies pay us money, for identifying that carbon as being saved, so it goes against what they're putting in the air. It's not a cap and trade. This is more a feel-good thing, like Amazon or big companies like that, so that they care, they pay us money, okay? Well, one of the things that we thought about using that money for is exactly that, having a fund that can pay that portion that's necessary that the county has to put in to get the grant, on some of these other things. And this could be huge. We're talking millions of dollars potentially a year, probably more than we make off of cutting trees. Like potentially 3 times as much, but it's a little dangerous to say that out loud because we don't know that because they haven't done it.
Yeah.
But that's what it looks like. So this could be huge from the standpoint of sequestering carbon, but also the money can be used to help us leverage other opportunities, which I think is really exciting. And even maybe lower taxes.
yeah, Chris.
County Park. Be the bankroller for such things.
Yeah, I think that's a real possibility. It's all, nothing's been decided because we aren't gonna start making these decisions until we have some money in the bank. So we know what's happened, but these are all things that are being discussed.
So I just wanted to say thank you. Each of you did really good, provided a lot of great information, and you really worked well off of one another.
Yeah.
But again, you identified it right away. The silos that exist out there, we have to break those down and we have to work together and build those partnerships. And when it comes to planning and writing those grants, we should be working together as well, whether it's for the co-op, whether it's for the community, whether it's for the county, whether it's for the tribe. Together, all of us working, to identify those grants that are gonna build these communities and build that climate change and adaptation and the preservation for future generations, because that's what we're here. We're here using this, let's preserve it for the future, and let's work together to do that. And there is the other Northwest Regional Planning Commission. That region is, this region is the only region in the state of Wisconsin that received technical assistance funding to help write grants for this area, for businesses, tribes, whatever. And we have to explore that, and, you know, since you write grants and work through that and do the planning, we should try to build that partnership if that's possible. The other one is electronic vehicle charging stations. We know that that's something that needs to be accomplished throughout the entire state, through all of the tribes. They're building this route and passing that through to build that infrastructure. Bayfield Electric, the co-op, I mean, you have a part to do there. We as the tribe have the transportation department, so the BART system, they too have electronic vehicle charging stations that need to be put in and placed throughout this area. What's funny is we have all of this money that's coming out or that's being designated. Short time frames to get that information out there and get a project put in. And the ones that are gonna succeed are the ones that are gonna have their MEPAs done, the ones that are going to have partnerships out there, because it does talk a lot about partnerships. But we haven't even finished with the infrastructure, bipartisan infrastructure law funding yet. And here we're gonna go with another one, and we're missing out on a lot of the bipartisan funding as well. So I just want to say, I commend each of you, commend you for having this meeting, and it's really great to get together.
A detailed question out to Bill Bailey. I just was curious whether for electric vehicles, can I reserve a charging station ahead of time? In other words, can I, before I go to Minneapolis, can I book a charging station so that I know when I get there, the charging station will be available? Does that happen anywhere?
Roger, why don't you answer that one?
No.
Right.
You basically,
That's really helpful.
I think it is.
We have two questions here on our Zoom, and one is coming from Robert Green.
Oh,
What?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions for Bill Bailey. One is anyone in this region using the Polar Night Energy sand seasonal storage approach? And if they did, would they potentially qualify for a federal income tax credit next year? And a related question is, are electric upgrades for heat pumps covered under the act, and when would that funding begin for the electric upgrades to install heat pumps?
The answer to your second question is 2023.
Doesn't show me, so I don't know if I'm.
Yes, the heat pumps or anything related to an energy efficiency project would be eligible. They would probably be filed with your tax return. So I would check the details with your CPA. Your first question, there's plenty of money in these bills for innovative technologies. And so I would say yes to that also. As long as it's reducing carbon and it's basically a renewable energy type project, it probably would qualify.
Well, it would potentially allow a person to use summer surplus solar energy to heat their house the next winter. So it's very innovative. It's being done in Finland. PolarNightEnergy.fi is the company.
Send me a link, Bob.
Will do.
Thanks.
Thank you. And then Alyssa, you have a question.
Yes, I had a couple of comments. This has been a really exciting conversation, and I just wanted to add a few updates from Ashland County. And I wish I could turn my camera on, but I keep getting the broadband is unstable message. So I'll just plow ahead here. It was great to hear Steve mention Bayfield County's forest sequestration process. Ashland County Forestry Department is also doing that. And we're just undergoing all the scientific review of the carbon storage capacity right now. So it's going to happen in both counties, which is exciting. Linda mentioned the viability of study groups, and I personally love that idea. And I'm actually on the City of Ashland Sustainability Committee, and we've been talking about EVs and the charging system for a while. And we asked the City of Ashland leadership to work with us to develop a work group that would develop a strategic EV charging and purchasing plan. So we're just waiting to hear if that's been approved. But we've identified about 13 people in the region from different businesses and community groups and hospitals and lodging that would be interested in having input on that regional, I should say, citywide strategic plan. I did want to brag a little bit about UW Extension. I work for Extension in Ashland County and Community Development, but we have a statewide specialist in UW Extension who works specifically in renewable energy. And she's putting together some materials about technical assistance on how to navigate the new grant money coming out. And the long-term plan in the next 6 to 12 months would be to train us county educators so that we're better able to help our county's communities. So that's a positive part. And then lastly, I just wanted to say, I'm one of those weirdos who loves comprehensive land use planning. And I'm excited to work with the community right now to include climate forecasts and mitigation plans and incorporate those into their current comprehensive land use plan. And I get some help on that with UW Extension specialists. So I just want to mention UW in all the counties have UW educators as other people who could help you in this process. Thanks.
Okay. Alrighty, any questions otherwise from the Zoom group? I'm not seeing any hands up, but you can just speak out. Okay. This gathering actually is a part of our fall membership meeting, and we didn't plug that information because the topic just seemed to be so important. But you know, I think as a plug for the league, and thank you, Lisa, for using that term. But as a plug for the league, you know, we've identified on the board that this year our focus is going to be voter services and climate related natural resources issues, sustainability. And I think, you know, many folks looking at the league see us as being primarily in the presence in the community with thank you, with voter services and with our voters forums, which are really important. They're really important because, as Steve identified, if we look at our school boards and our county boards, they are affecting us as individuals and our families more than probably anybody else. So our voters forums are really important. But the other part of this, and it's the reason we emphasize tonight, and we also are talking about adding on to with our next program in October here, is that we need to be informed citizens and we need to be civically engaged. And those are terms that are almost archaic in the way our society has gone. And so the reason that we have ongoing programs on other topics that we've had over the years is that it's extremely important. If you're going to vote, this is important, but then you need to know what you're voting on. And that's what tonight is in part about. We need to know this stuff. We need to know the many things that you've taught us tonight in order to be a wise voter when we hit the polls in November. It's extremely, extremely important. Now, the other thing I want to comment on, and this is from my role as a member of a number of the co-ops in the area. And I was in Madison 3 years ago at the co-op lobbying days. This is a statewide program where all the co-ops and mutuals and savings and loans, which are all cooperatives, they're member owned, and we all meet and go over to the Capitol. And so the Department of Agriculture at that time spoke, and he had me in tears. I mean, I'm an old farmer, you know, so he had me in tears with some of his visions for agriculture and sustainable ag in our state. And I walked up to him afterwards and thanked him. And he said, well, where are you from? And I said, well, I'm from up in Ashland County. And he said, Ashland, Bayfield County, your area of Wisconsin is the show place for sustainable energy and sustainable agriculture and food security. Everyone in the state of Wisconsin could be looking to you. So we are recognized. And so I say that as a note of hope for some of the dilemmas that we may be facing. We can do this. We have citizens out here, and we need to become engaged in this process with our elected officials. We need to be showing up. And so, you know, it's amazing to me, the words I heard tonight from everybody here. We can do this. We can work together and figure this out, and continue to be the show place of Wisconsin. You know, we've got it up here. We've got it. We've got resiliency. We have the intellect, and we have a culture that, as I say, has worked together in the past to have many successes. So we need to be proud of that. Are there other questions? Yeah, Kathy.
This is for Steve. When you're talking about your housing development, what about transportation? And that's, I was at another conference in Madison a few years ago called The Ideas, and they got together the university, the tribe, all minority groups, and all the business, you know, the banks and the finances, and talked about very openly and called each other on issues, which was great.
Mm-hmm.
But I did not realize how much transportation was integrated with housing and economic development, because we're so in love with the car. And that has a huge impact on being sustainable, of giving up our love affair with all of us owning our own vehicle to go places. And so I was thinking, when you're making community housing projects, that other piece, that silo that's there, that really is so integrated with healthcare, economics, whatever, and I never saw that until I heard them all talk about it and all have the solution. And nobody wanted to take the leadership to start getting it done. And I was just, you know, it was kind of one of those light bulbs that go off. But I was just interested in is that being considered when you talk about a housing project, of where how they're going to get their food, their healthcare, and their job. So you build it, but where are you building it? And the biggest complaint down there was you build the factories and the development up away from everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And then people who need the jobs can't get there. And I was just wondering if there was any consideration when you're doing this.
Well, on this particular project, I am not aware of that being discussed yet, but you're absolutely right. That's got to be an important part of it.
See, there is, in the request for proposal, there is language for EV charging.
good.
There's also the Blue Goose,
Oh, yeah.
it's gonna become electric as part of the BART system.
Great.
So
Yeah.
there's already stuff in place.
Oh, that's
I mean, we do have, BART is unusual in that it's rural
right,
mass transit. There's not much of that in the whole state.
right,
We're one of the first. National and Bayfield County have been using it for decades,
right.
but it's not anywhere near what it should be as far as ridership. partnership.
I have a question, and this has to do with, residents, private homes. And, in Ashland County, a large percentage of our housing was, I think it's like almost 75–80% was built before, the 1970s. And so we have old housing stock. I don't know the numbers for, for Bayfield County, but, we have a lot of homes that need insulation, windows, new furnaces, new systems. Right now, as I'm aware, Focus on Energy through Excel, and then the co-op working through, Bayfield Co-op working through the Housing Authority has tried to filter some of that information and money to residents. With all this new money proposed under the IRA, is there going to be a lifting up of getting that information and to the public, to the citizens, and to the families living in old homes?
It's on our website right now,
Yeah.
Inflation Reduction Act. The presentation that I gave is on there. The wordage is there, how it actually comes down. Most of the money, there's two pots of $4 billion that's going through state energy offices. So the Wisconsin State Energy Office, Office of Energy Innovation is what it's called now, will be administering two different pots of money. And one of them is rebates. Like if you buy an energy efficient refrigerator or put in a heat pump, they're just going to physically give you, I think a heat pump is $6,000, so it's called the Homes Program. So those programs are being developed now. It's going to be next year before they're ready, but the Focus on Energy people, probably a lot of it will go through Focus on Energy. But I'm not sure that all of it will. Nobody does. It hasn't been developed yet.
Okay.
The chair of the Public Service Commission was here 4 weeks ago. And I asked her that question. She had no clue. I mean, it hasn't even gotten to the staff level yet. It's just too early, too soon. But it's something that we will keep an eye on.
Yeah. Well, at the grassroots level, it's really important that, as complex as it is, it has to be translated for people to understand. And, tonight has certainly helped us, but, a 68-year-old, 80-year-old woman down in Butternut may not quite have be in a position to understand.
I think Lissa's comment about the extension can help too.
Good. Yeah, good. Thank you.
Bill, did you say that the biogas that Philomene is looking at, would that receive support through this legislation?
You bet. You bet.
Yeah.
I just wanted to comment on the BART system. It's a common refrain that Americans love their cars, but I don't agree. BART is one of the 3 rural transportation districts in the state, and set up before the state made it illegal for taxing districts for that purpose. And kudos to Bayfield County for setting that up. Also, I mean, we eliminated light rail funding in the state at a federal level. And so I'm bringing up these state issues because, the state has treated rural areas with a lot of basically a retrograde funding mentality. So I know we're talking about a federal bill and all the accomplishments of the county governments here, but does anyone want to comment on where the state fits into this conversation, if there's any?
Well, I just mentioned that, for example, all this federal money is coming through the Office of Energy Innovation, so that's all state money. I mean, it's got to go through federal requirements and stuff, and that's why it's going to take so long. But yeah, the state is managing and administering almost all of it. The Department of Transportation is the State Department of Transportation is administering all of the EV charging money.
And I mean, sometimes what we've seen and when we have federal money that's given to the state is that the Joint Finance Committee gets their sticky hands on things and can oftentimes just, you know, put different policy spins and requirements on funding that's coming from the feds. And so that can, I think that's a thing that happens. I'm not really gonna comment on it, but it is a thing that happens, right?
Well, coming from the health perspective, I will comment on that. And a prime example in our state is the holdup on getting the opioid monies out to the community so that we can deal with the mental health, problems that we are seeing in our community. And I'm not sure that's even been resolved. I mean, supposedly it's coming. But we've had a fine example of that, and it's a very good question, I'm sure. And
Phoebe mentioned, and an issue that's concerned me for a long time is this competitive nature of the grant allocations. I mean, I'm all in favor of not wasting money and making sure that it be spent adequately, but might not it be possible for the money that was available to tribes to be divided equitably among all the tribes? For money that could be available for co-ops to be given to the co-ops and say, you have this chunk of money, make sure it's spent in sustainable resources way. Why isn't that possible?
Well, I suppose it is. I can't speak to what they're actually gonna do with all as part of this rollout of how they're gonna administer this. Like Bill said, some of this is gonna be through states, some of it's gonna be directly to the federal government. If it's payments for solar, for example, that'll come directly from the federal government. So you're gonna have all kinds of different organizations administering this. And that's kind of back to one of, when I first mentioned, kind of from our perspective, there's a lot of different channels we're gonna have to try to swim through here, try to find that funding. And some we're gonna get, some we may not, because of what you're saying. The examples that we've talked about already, about how, in theory, I think what the government is saying is you want to put the money where it makes the most sense, where the most need is. So if in theory you have more need in Oklahoma, it's going to make up an example, than you do in northern Wisconsin, then should you give that money, more of that money to Oklahoma than northern Wisconsin? I guess in theory, that probably makes sense, at least to me as an old planner, right? Practical reality, as we know, that's not necessarily how this is going to work. So I don't know the answer to your question, unfortunately. I do think that you are going to have, you're gonna have to lay out your case, for lack of a more elegant way to put it, when you're going for these funds. And that's where the grant writing that we've talked about comes in. That's where knowing how to navigate some of these waters comes in, because it's not going to be as simple as just, writing up a one-page summary and sending it in and getting a check. And I don't know how to navigate all those waters, because a lot of this is new, certainly for Bayfield Electric. It's new for me personally in terms of I don't have the background for it. It's new for our staff because we don't have the background for it. It's, federal funding, other than a couple of grants we've gotten from FEMA for, the flooding was one of them. Co-ops usually aren't dealing with federal money, exactly. So that it's all new for us. Which is why it's good, looking at, Bill and the county and the tribes working together, I think is the only way that, well, it's the way that makes the most sense to try to get the most bang for the buck, I guess, for lack of a better way to put it, I think.
Just to add to that, I think projects should be based somewhat on merit, not
Right.
just divided equally.
Right.
I mean, if you have a good project versus somebody that's put no effort into it at all. But we're seeing in some of the allocations that it's not based on merit. It's probably based on kickbacks. And I don't think I need to say any more about it. I mean, the federal government, there's lobbying and
Mhm.
people get paid off and, you know, we're seeing things, the money being distributed not equitably. No matter how you view it, just the way it is.
I mean, it's also, it seems that there's always a rural urban competition and, you know, kind of coastal, Midwest, Southern. You know, those are all dynamics that can come into play to either advantage or disadvantage your projects. So I think we just have to fight for as much as we can possibly get.
Just keep applying for the grants.
Yeah, and.
Try to do a real good job.
Yeah, doing good work. You know, we're doing good work and we're doing it over a long period of time. This isn't just like a one and done thing. You know, we've been making very serious investments into this area for a long time. We have great people, you know, and then really uplifting our homegrown talent. Getting young people involved in this area. Those are some of the things that we need to do in order to stay competitive.
And I'll just mention that the federal government used to fund things in more of a by equity distribution, and then now it's gone more toward competitive grant. And that had something to do with sewage overflow in Ashland. Federal government doesn't just give grants anymore, it's all the competitive base. And that plays out in cities like Flint, Michigan and Jackson, Mississippi now, when it's distributed through states.
They don't have the money to write the grants to get the money.
Right?
Yeah,
So I mean, I kind of bring that up because we're at
yeah.
the Women Voters meeting, and it's sort of a perspective thing, but if that perspective rings true in our counties, I mean, how do we sit that? Is there an opinion you'll have on that? I mean, I think we sit pretty good, given our economic and diversity.
You win some, you lose some.
Right. And the Wisconsin Energy Innovation Grant Program, they've had 3 funding rounds and only 2 entities have got all 3 of them. Bayfield County and Dane County, for the city of Madison, one or the other, whichever one's down there. I mean, I don't know if it's Dane County or city of Madison, but it's one or the other and Bayfield County. So
Congratulations.
we're doing just fine. You know, we just need to keep writing the grants, keep coming up with good projects.
Yeah, from my perspective, like for Bayfield, like we're not any different than almost every other co-op in the state. I mean, there's a couple of larger ones that may have a little bit more staff and resources to do some of this than we do. But most of the co-ops in the state, most of the co-ops in Minnesota, other than again, a few of the large ones around the Twin Cities. I mean, we're all in the same boat from that perspective. You know, so I agree with what we're saying, or what's you got to keep applying and keep fighting for it. You're gonna expect you're gonna win some, you're gonna lose some
Chris and I have been on enough of these that we respectively disagree a lot.
on a lot of stuff. Yeah.
And I disagree, Bayfield Electric is special. And one of the things that's special about it is their distributed generation policy, the new one, and hopefully they'll pass next month. And the reason why it's successful, will be successful, is because of this guy right here. And this goes back to the leadership question we had a while back. The reason why Bayfield County is successful is because of Mark Allison. The reason why Bad River is successful is Mike Wiggins, and I deal personally with Dan Wiggins. The reason why Bayfield Electric is successful is because, hold on. These.
Does Bill Daly play into any of that, or?
Bill Bailey's the glue.
Yes.
I'm just a team player, but I work with all of these guys and they're all great. Bayfield Electric started out great, in my opinion, in 2016. Then we put in a solar community garden. Everything was going great. We had large group buys and we scared them because of our success. And then it went, they got rid of their distributed generation policy. They were fearful. This guy came into the thing. He opened up the books and we just had a couple questions. Well, how does this affect financially? How does this affect in the co-op? And we proved that it really didn't affect it hardly at all. and turned everything around, and we presented it to the board, the Bayfield County Board, and they were blown away at how little financial impact the solar was having, at least at this point. We developed a model to track it in the future, and we turned it around. That is the success story that I'm trying to tell around the state, and I will tell it around the state. So, you're special, Chris.
I just make one little quick comment that I think I can only speak from Bayfield County's perspective, because that's the only county board I've ever served on. But I have been very pleased with the complete lack of partisan politics. It is rare, and we don't have, believe me, everybody on the board is not flaming liberal. It's quite diverse, but I'm always amazed at how the vast majority of votes on issues are unanimous. We all are looking at what that particular issue is and what's important to the county, and even if we've had a pretty debated, pretty strong debate, it's a unanimous vote. And that is, I think, really outstanding. And one of the reasons why we're successful. Just gotta throw that in.
Well, I can say one thing, you look at how complex all these new bills are for us, for you, writing the grants. But what I also think is every one of our civil servants, so this is an add-on on their regular job. And so I get concerned about, oh, government is bad, and lower the we're the ones responsible. And if we keep saying lower our taxes, when it's the rank and file people doing the work that's making sure your grants are read, that's doing that. I don't know the fix, but I get concerned about when the government is attacked, rather than did we vote for and what do they stand for in terms of supporting the people that are really doing the work. And that's what my concern always is in these discussions about, or this is competitive. Well, somebody's got to make all those grants and help make those decisions and have all these charts that help them make them. And I get concerned about all of us in terms of our attitudes for the people who are really making the government work and our society work, and often they get the bad press, and we have some responsibility.
Other comments? Okay, thank you, everyone. This has been quite enlightening, to say the least. It's been really good discussion, and thank you, all you folks up there on Zoom. We do, the IRA, as was identified by Bill in one of the slides, involves other components, and we've covered.
Can your mask?
Oh, sorry. I'm so used to masking now, it's, besides that, nurses are really crazy about these things. But we did put together an addendum with some references to some good reading materials on the taxation and the health related topic. Our next program will be October 18th, and it's going to be at the Washburn Library, the basement room, meeting room, and from 6 to 8. And what we're going to be talking about is the privatization of Medicare and the threat to seniors' health security. It'll incorporate a bit more of what we find out between now and then about the IRA as well. So it's a continuation in a sense, but adding on some extra components. And
No, when you're done, I have an announcement.
oh, okay. We also have some materials in the back for folks who are here. And you want to hit that table. It's mainly voter services, I believe. And there's some good materials out there. We work closely with the folks in D-Suite in particular, who's working on with the reservations on voter registration in the indigenous community. It's, as I say, probably what we're most known for is our voter services. although we have many hats, many hats. So with that, I really just can't extend a big enough thanks to the panel. You did a wonderful job, and will have us thinking a lot about what we as citizens can do to support the work you're doing. So thank you. So